Kim Peets and welcome to My Story, His Story. What do we know about Seventh-day Adventist church leaders and how does God influence them? In this series we take a closer look at these Christian leaders and we invite them to share their stories with us. Here with me I have health and nutrition specialist Mrs. Sibilla Johnson. Hi Sibilla.
Hello Kim.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm really happy to be here with you.
Thank you. You're not originally from Australia, are you?
No, I was born in Holland and I came to Australia with my family when I was 14 years old, so I was still fairly young. Because we were assisted migrants, which means we came with 3 suitcases and nothing else, my parents needed me to work. And so I wasn't able to go back to school. Oh. My dream in life was to become a nurse, but that hasn't happened. So I started work, and because I couldn't speak the language at all, I learned the language from other people.
That must have been very hard for you.
It was.
14 years of age.
Yeah, very difficult. But there were a group of young people in a country town where we were living, and they came to me and they seemed a really happy bunch, and they said, look, we want to help you learn this language. And I thought, how great. And so after work I would spend time with these young people. Some of them were just kids, they were mostly school children. And they would teach me words and phrases and I would practice these. And one day I was practicing them in the garden. And I must have been getting a little closer to the accent that's necessary for people to understand what I was saying. And there was a lady next door who was also in the garden, and after me saying all these words and phrases, and I was so proud of myself that I was getting closer to what I should have been saying. And this lady came in and knocked on the door of our house and started talking to my mother. Because my mother was less able to speak English than I could, and I wasn't very good, I went over to try and help. And I couldn't understand what the lady was saying either, but we could see she was very upset, and she mentioned my name. And so my mother concluded I had done something really bad.
Oh dear. And
I didn't know what it was. And so there were other Dutch families living nearby, and so we took this lady, and my mother and I, we went to this other Dutch family and asked what it was that was wrong. And then I learned that these kids had been teaching me every bad and dirty word that they even could think of. And I was so disappointed, I felt so hurt. I really didn't even want to stay in Australia. Now,
it wouldn't have been a good experience for you to start on.
No,
I mean, you'd just gotten
really
here and then that happened.
Yeah.
But it wasn't all bad, was it?
No, it wasn't. A short while later I met another young lady and she indicated she wanted to be my friend, and I was a little wary.
Of course.
Because I thought this may just happen all over again. Perhaps this is what people do to have fun. But this young lady took me to her parents' place, not straight away, but after we met a few times. And her parents were just wonderful people. They invited me for meals, they gave me clothes because I did need them, and they invited me to go on a holiday. And I had never been on a holiday in my whole life.
Oh, wow.
And this was in a caravan, and I'd never even been inside a caravan before. And that was so special. I will never forget that. And these people then eventually asked if I would like to come to church with them. I didn't even ask them which church because it didn't matter. Whichever church was their church was good enough for me, and it was the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
True.
Yes.
Oh, that is fantastic.
And so I went along, and again I experienced that acceptance and love in that church, country church family. And I then became a Seventh-day Adventist.
That's amazing.
And so it shows that caring and being loving and having genuine friendship for others really touches people's lives.
It does, and it certainly changed yours, didn't it?
It completely changed my life as a teenager, and I will never forget that. And I'm really grateful for that.
That's fascinating, Sibilla. And tell us more about your family and what happened after that.
Well, I was brought up as a Christian in Holland. When we came to Australia, we didn't attend any church because, well, the language is a problem, and I've just explained that. But also there were so many different churches and my parents didn't know which was which. And so my parents finished up going to the Uniting Church.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
And I became a Seventh-day Adventist.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Is that where you met your husband?
Yes, it is. A couple of years later, when we moved from the country town where I was to the city, and it was also at church that I met my husband, Arthur.
Okay.
Very, very special man. We have 3 grown-up children and 4 wonderful grandchildren.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
Oh, thank you for sharing that with us. We really appreciate
God
that.
has really led both of us in our work and in our ministries, and I'm very grateful for that. If someone back in those days when I first came to Australia, and even when I first joined the church, if someone back then had said that one day I would be teaching, I would have laughed, because there was nothing inside me that even wanted to do that, or there was nothing inside me that I felt I had the ability to do that, which shows you that God can make a complete difference to your life and your ministry if you let Him.
That's true, that's true. Coming up next, we find out the conversion from shy girl to public speaker. Welcome back to My Story, His Story. Here with me is Sibilla Johnson, health and nutrition expert. Hi Sibilla, thanks again for joining us. You've gone from working for Sanitarium Health Food Company to being a nutrition specialist to being the health director. This is not where you thought you'd be, is it?
Definitely not. When I started my work in health ministry, I actually lived in Papua New Guinea, in Lae. And while I was there, and I should just say I was a very shy person, and even to come up the front in church to do something would be scary, and I would avoid at all cost.
So you had the sweaty palms.
Oh yes, and that's not hard in Lae because it's really hot there as well.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
And so what I'm really saying is I was not an upfront person at all. I really loved the Lord and I wanted to serve Him, but not in anything that had to do with public speaking. And yet my life has turned out to be the exact opposite.
Tell us a story.
Yes.
Tell us probably the first thing.
Okay. When I was there, we had a health director there for the Papua New Guinea Union Mission, Pastor Raymond Baird. And he came to me and he said, I'd like you to help me with some community programs for the national ladies. Now, I loved those national people already. I'd been there a few years before he arrived. And he said, I'd like you to run some health programs. And I can still remember feeling flattered that he thought I could do that. And I'm thinking, he has no idea who I am and all this stuff that goes on in here.
That's right.
And anyway, and so I didn't accept to do that. But he kept on encouraging me. And one day he said to me, Sibilla, everybody can make a contribution here in this country. And I remember thinking, well, maybe even I could. And so I started with cooking demonstrations. I've always loved cooking, I've always loved food, and I'm still in that same business now.
Well, it's a good place to start.
Yes, it is. And so I started off in my own home, and then I ran programs in local church halls and other places. And confidence started to build a little, and I started to actually enjoy it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And so then one day, a little later after that, Ray Baird came to me and he said, I'd like you to go to Madang, which is a city on the north coast of Papua New Guinea, sort of west of Lae. I had not been away by myself before to run anything except a little cooking show in a hall somewhere. And I did a lot of praying. And the reason that he'd asked me to go there is that we had a fairly large group of Adventist people who were attending a paramedical college. And these people had contacted the church mission office and had said they'd like someone to come up and share the Adventist health principles with them because they didn't understand those. And so that was my job, to go there to do that. And so I did agree to go, and it was for a whole week. And so I arrived there, and there's a transit house on the compound where the mission is, which is a house that people just stay in for a little while and then go. And so it's empty a lot of the time. I walked into that house, and all of a sudden, all those fears came back. And it was just like, who are you to come here and teach these people?
It would have been slightly overwhelming, I could imagine.
Very much so. And the house is in a beautiful position on a lovely blue lagoon. Really, the whole of the Madang mission is a little piece of paradise. It's beautiful. And I remember standing in front of that window, looking at the water first and then looking up at the sky and talking to God and saying to him, if you want me to work in ministry, well, health ministry, you will need to perform so many miracles, because there is nothing inside me that feels that I can do this.
Yes, yes.
And so after that prayer, I cleaned the house, which needed cleaning, because I was to conduct those programs in that house for the whole week, you see. Yeah. And the programs included health talks, naturally, of our health principles, as well as some cooking demonstrations. Now, I was very organised, and I even had my shopping lists made out, as well as the recipes for these people. And so we had food demos, and then we had the talks. The next morning, a mission truck came to pick me up to take me to the market where you do your shopping, the local shopping. And when we arrived at the market, I had a little list with all the things I needed, and I showed it to the lady who had taken me. And as she looked at the list, she said, "Oh, a lot of this produce is not available this time of the year in Madang." And I'm really thinking, that'd be right. Just when you think you've got it together.
So what did you do?
Well, she explained to me firstly that the season in Madang was different to the season in Lae, which I wouldn't have even known.
It's the opposite, because it's on the other side of the coast.
And I wouldn't have known that.
Yes.
And so I got out of the car into the marketplace where all the people are with their produce. And I prayed so much. Tell me what I should be doing and what I should be buying. And on the right-hand side, as I remember it, on the right-hand side were all the people who were selling their produce. And on the left-hand side, Kim, was a table that had virtually everything on it that I needed.
Oh, that's a miracle.
It was a miracle. And I stood there and I felt cold and in awe of our wonderful God. And I said to him, here I am. But you will still need to perform lots of miracles, because I still don't know how I'm going to do this. But it was a fairly clear sign that that is what I should be doing.
Oh, that is fantastic. And what happened next?
Well, I went back to the house, and then each day we conducted meetings. And each day there were special things that happened which could not be coincidences.
No.
And so right through that whole week, it was a very special time. And I bonded with the people, we shared information, and I came away from there with a commitment to God that I would work in health ministry.
And here you are today, still in health ministry.
Yes.
What happened after that? Where did you go from there?
From there, we were asked to go back to New Zealand to live there. And it was there that Sanitarium requested for me to work in the nutrition area. And so I ran some public programs there, really as an introduction to a nutrition service which Sanitarium eventually established. And that was special, and yet those same fears came back because I wasn't in Papua New Guinea anymore. I was in an English-speaking country, and my English then was okay, but there were still little phrases or words that I might have said just a little differently. Well, I was conscious of that. Maybe other people are not. That's the problem, isn't it? We see things ourselves sometimes differently.
Yes.
But you know that as I look back to those days in New Guinea, and after that I came to Australia and looked after a nutrition service in Melbourne for 7 years. The people that God put into my life were the people that I needed. When I was in New Zealand, there was a wonderful lady who came to help me with the programs. And as she walked in, she said, well, I'm not much good in the kitchen, but I'm really good at doing dishes. And I remember thinking, well, that really wasn't what I was hoping for.
You wanted someone who was probably going to be better in the kitchen.
Yeah, and we would work together and we'd establish these programs, we'd develop these programs. That lady was an English teacher. Well, she was a secretarial teacher, but English was one of her main areas.
Yes.
And it was exactly what I needed. And so, and I still have contact with that lady. She's very special to me.
That's amazing. Well, your English is beautiful now.
Well, we can thank the Lord for that.
That's right, that's right.
And it just shows, doesn't it, when we follow Him, He can make things happen that we are not even, can't even imagine.
Next, we hear where Sibilla draws her inspiration from. Welcome back to My Story, His Story. We've been talking with Sibilla Johnson, health and nutrition expert. Sibilla, I've really enjoyed our stories. We've gone from your childhood in Holland, moving to Australia at the age of 14, having to learn English from scratch, and then the miracle after miracle about how you've ended up in health and nutrition. You've been working in Mongolia recently.
Yes, I have, and that was very interesting. Food and nutrition, they do not have an understanding of as we do. And so my main aim was to bring an understanding of the way the body functions and the type of foods that we need so that body can function the way that God designed it to.
What is the lifespan for people who live in Mongolia?
Well, people retire in Mongolia at 45.
Good grief.
But before you book your ticket to go there, so that you can retire at 45, most of them are not alive by the time they're 55. And that's sad. And so I spoke to a group of doctors in one of the hospitals, and they had especially asked if we could come and talk about how to increase the quality of life for these dear people. And so we looked at plant foods mainly, because their animal food content is very high and their plant food content very low. And so all we did was say, have a better balance so the body can function the way that it was designed to.
Oh, that's amazing.
And during that time, one of the doctors asked me how old I was. Now, that is not a normal question that you would ask for someone.
That's something that's quite rude in some cultures, isn't it?
It would be, but not there. So if ever you go there, don't feel embarrassed. You just tell them, like I did. And I was 65 at the time. And they yahooed, and they clapped, and then they went very quiet. And one of the doctors said, through an interpreter, because I'm not able to speak their language, through the interpreter, one of the doctors said, but you are still working. And then another one said, and you are still walking and travelling and teaching. And then they said, what's the secret? And so we were able to go through the natural laws of health, which includes healthy eating.
Oh, that is fantastic,
I
Sibilla.
didn't present vegetarian to them because that wasn't appropriate. However, we did say that there had to be a better balance between the animal foods and the plant foods.
Well, you were leading by example for sure. Yes. Now tell us a little bit about your spiritual inspiration.
Yes.
I'd be interested to hear why Peter is your favourite Bible character.
Well, firstly, I didn't find it easy to pick one Bible character. And I'm
Very
sure...
hard. They're all very good.
They are. But I did settle on Peter, obviously. And the reason is that Jesus first called Peter and he said, come and follow me. They were the first words that Jesus spoke to Peter. And one of the last words that Jesus spoke to Peter was, you must follow me. And in the Bible, in Mark chapter 1, Jesus says in verse 17, come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will make you fishers of men. At once they left their nets and followed him.
Did you get inspired by the fact that he was a fisher of men and it was indeed a food issue?
No, the food bit really didn't touch me, so that was all right. But one of the main reasons why I chose Peter is because God changed Peter's life. But he never stopped being Simon Peter. And he didn't stop making mistakes. And when God chooses people, when he chose the 12 disciples, when Jesus chose the 12 disciples, he didn't choose models. He chose real people.
He did.
People who could be impressed and changed by his love. And then he sent them out to teach others of that very special love that God has for us, and that it is available to everyone. And people, and even sometimes myself, you could say, what does God see in us? We are sinful human beings. But it encourages me to have the story of Peter, because Peter did great things for God. And as I said, he never stopped being Simon Peter, and he still made mistakes. And so I want to continue to serve God faithfully each day, even though at times I fail as Peter did. And so to me, Peter is a wonderful example that God can use all people, providing we allow him to. I was very slow at allowing God to use me, and I don't want other people to make that same mistake. I'm also grateful that God is so patient and so gracious. I'm grateful that God used my time in Papua New Guinea, because as that pastor said to me, anyone can make a contribution here, and I thought, well, maybe even I could. Whereas if I'd been in Australia, it may have taken longer, or maybe I may not have even accepted that. And so I'm really grateful for that. We have a wonderful God who can use everyone, even people with fears. And fears hold you in a grip of inactivity. And we all have fears, and I still have some too. And I'm sure we all will until the end of time. But those fears can be reduced if we allow Jesus to work in us, and if we face our fears with our hand in his.
Sibilla, thank you so much for your interesting stories, and thank you also for your personal testimony.
You're very welcome, and I'm happy that I've been able to spend this time with you.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of My Story, His Story, and we hope that you join us again next time.